So welcome everybody. My name is Joy Rosenthal. I'm from One Breath Rising, and we're so thrilled that you're here and thrilled to be presenting Susana again. She did a reading for us in the old days when we were in person at 440 Gallery. And 440 Gallery always had their events at 4:40 in the afternoon, which is why we have this very strange but memorable starting time. So just in case you were wondering about that. I'm going to introduce EJ in a second, who will introduce Susana. But first, I just want to thank our funders, the Brooklyn Arts Council. We just got another grant for 2023, so we're thrilled about that. Poets and Writers, the Park Slope Civic Council, 440 Gallery, Garner Glazer Foundation, our individual donors, our audience. And we started in 2015 as kind of a very small organization. We started by going out for dinner and talking, and here we are almost 8 years later, and we're still going and getting stronger and picking up steam. So as I said, we're really thrilled that you're here. Just two quick things. One is, especially when Susana starts, you might want to put it in speaker view, which on my screen is on the top right. You probably all know this already. And it's fine to mute yourself. I know for the reader, it's a little strange because nobody's responding, but she knows you're there, and then we'll be able to talk at the end. So thank you very much, and we're thrilled that you're here. While we're going, I'll put the donate link in the chat. If you care to donate, that would be much appreciated. But mostly we're really glad that you're here. EJ?
Thanks, Joy. Well, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon for our wonderful reader, Susana H. Case. We've had the good fortune of having Susana read for us a couple of years ago. And, you know, sometimes a poet leaves such a memory that you want to have them come back. And so we invited her to come back for this season. I'm going to read you her bio. Susana H. Case is the author of 8 books of poetry. The Damage Done from Broadstone Books, 2022 is her newest, and she's won a Pinnacle Award for Best Poetry Book. Dead Shark on the N Train from Broadstone Books in 2020 also won a Pinnacle Book Award for Best Poetry Book, as well as a New York City Big Book Awards Distinguished Favorite, and was a final for the Eric Hoffer Book Award. Drugstore Blue from Five Oaks Press won an Independent Publisher Book Award, and she is also the author of 5 chapbooks, 2 of which won poetry prizes. Her poems appear widely in magazines and anthologies, most recently in Calyx, the Cortland Review, 14 Hills, Portland Review, Potomac Review, Rattle, and RHINO, among others. She has been published by a translation into Polish, Spanish, Italian, and Portuguese. Case is co-editor with Margo Taft Stever of I Want to Be Loved by You, Poems on Marilyn Monroe, Milk and Cake Press, 2022, which was a finalist for an American Book Fest Award and an International Book Award in the anthology category. Susana is co-editor of Slapper and Howell Press and co-curates with Lynn McGee, Sandy Yanone, and Carolyn Wright, the W.E. West Bicoastal Poets of the Pandemic and Beyond series, which features writers from both coasts and many other regions. She recently retired. Good for you, Susana. She retired as professor from the New York Institute of Technology in New York City, where she taught for 38 years. I got my MBA from there, Susana.
Oh, wow.
Small world.
It was.
Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to introduce Susana H. Case.
Thank you so much. And thank you for being here on a Sunday when I know there's lots of other competing things you could be doing. Not only other literary events, of which there are a number of them on Sunday always, but other fun things in your life. So I'm very grateful that you are here. And one of the things I was talking to EJ and Joy before we started, and I want to thank both of you for having me back. One of the things that I was mentioning to them, and which I mentioned on Facebook as well when I posted news about the reading, was just how special this series is, because it allows a poet, and as they both said, also musicians, to have a really large block of time to give you a sense of a whole body of work. So I'm not going to read from my whole body of work, but I am going to read from the Broadstone books and some newer poems, many of which will be in my new book, which will be out toward the end of the year also with Broadstone Books. So I'm going to start with this book, Dead Shark on the N Train, which came out in 2020. I've had a longstanding interest in violence, particularly gendered violence, and a lot of the poems in Dead Shark on the N Train address that interest. So let me start with Walking Home. The girl walking home alone doesn't know what to do about the stranger who calls her name. He claims he has a gun. His knowing her name is a gun. He blocks her way. Rail track, chain link fence, no parking sign. It's like that test she had in school yesterday, having to choose which animal doesn't belong. She guessed it was the cow. This girl knows nothing of farms. On her left, the empty tennis club. In front, the man who snarls he will kill her. Let me see the gun, in her piccolo voice. A train rushes by. If she were in it, her life would be different. The world is full of noise. Weeds, cigarette butts, rusted car, locked shed. She runs. She doesn't know if he can keep up. He's too old to catch her. He screams again, "I'll kill you." She doesn't look back. When I was younger, I had a friend who lived down the block who had a lot of sisters, and one of her sisters was murdered, and this poem was inspired by that murder. And it's called "It Hardly Seems to Belong to You or Me." At a restaurant on Mahoning, supposed to be Chinese, except for the white waitress refilling our water glasses, white bread on the table, an iffy special with white sauce, I tell you about a crime terrible in its ordinariness, a quarrel over money. He knifed her 9 times. It happened somewhere else, but seems more likely here. Maybe every town's the same that way. This story's such an old one. Specifics don't matter. Maybe you don't need to listen. Maybe I just need to talk, to tell you she made the papers back in New York. Snow falls outside, white slush filling up spaces not yet filled by words, dribbling the window, its leaky seals. Menominee Indians believe the universe started with a drop of water. Every killing, every poem, every storm. Truth seems ancient, surrounded by moisture. A whole history of the world wrapped in one wet, whitened narrative, not about who found her, the way her sister's face looked. Some of the violence that's considered in this poem is not human to human violence, but human to animal violence. And thus the title poem, Dead Shark on the N train, and there was one actually at one point. Dead shark on the N train. Poor brown fish beached at Coney Island, then carried in someone's arms to the roller coaster, where another man thought it beautiful and tried to transport it home, only to abandon it on the subway. And you know how it is in New York City, nothing surprises anyone. The car reeked of dead shark, and passengers took photos debating Instagram filters when the conductor asked everyone to leave and closed off that train. At the end of the line in Queens, a transit worker plastic bagged the body and normalized the car. I fled Queens when I grew up. Like sharks that migrate freely, I traveled to survive, didn't want to reach the end of my line in the same place I started out from, though I ended up just on the other side of the river. When someone on the number 1 had a heart attack and died, his corpse rode the loop from South Ferry to the Bronx and back to South Ferry twice. Like a man in his habitat, he seemed to be napping. Unlike the shark, no one put a Metro card under his fin, cigarette in his jaws, can of Red Bull by his side for the journey. This next one is inspired by a work of art that some of you might have seen at MoMA, Femme Égorgée, Woman with Her Throat Cut. It's a Giacometti sculpture. His decade of sex and death, the woman with her throat slit, a small nick in the carotid, her tiny head reaching for air as if bronze can gasp. Venus flytrap woman, spiky ribbed cockroach woman, convulsing, disemboweled. I have destroyed her, Giacometti said of busts of his wife, Annette. Serial expression of anger and guilt. He was better with hookers, the ultimate in womanhood. Like his art, endless repetition. It was the usual good girl whore dichotomy, as in his obsession, the prostitute Caroline, who stubbed out a cigarette on her portrait's well-placed bones, its jittery paint. Fail better, his friend Beckett wrote, fascination with the neck. Skeletal woman without pedestal, infertile man quasi-impotent, someone brutal in the vicinity, that crucial gaze. This is for no good reason. I get drunk and drop a glass, one of the pretty crystal ones, onto the dining room table, our meal getting cold while you wipe off slivers from wet oak with a congeal of paper towels. It's you who lays claim to a problem, and after tonight, you're not drinking anymore except on weekends. I've heard that before. Earlier, Monsanto was on TV again. They've been messing up another town, carelessly spilling chemicals over more than well-set tables, and the rug, clam sauce, its flavor gone. Well, what else is new? Our dogs have decided to hide under our leggy couch, and I don't blame them for lying low. Dogs can sense earthquakes, tornadoes, toxic spills long after we can. I should have stopped after the first glass, I say, as if this were deeply insightful, as if it were your fault not stopping me. No telling what we're both exposed to here. Both of these dogs, which are gone now, were adopted from a good friend of ours who's actually here today, Joanne Orth, who has always had Scotty dogs, still has Scotty dogs, and 2 of them came to to live with us. And as she well knows, they like to squeeze themselves into small spaces, including our couch. Last one from Dead Shark on the N Train. This is called The East River Isn't Romantic Anymore. And those are lyrics from a indie rock song. 16 miles of saltwater estuary that can't make up its mind in which direction to nudge the tugboats extend south from the arched bridge at Hellgate. Once a mass of ice got stuck, and for a few days commuters could cross on foot between Brooklyn and Manhattan. They've cleaned up the water from when human waste was dumped, when Harry Houdini performed his first wooden crate escape with shackles and straps. Swimmers practice their strokes from Brooklyn Bridge Park to Manhattan, where the current runs fast. Every year, some jumper drowns. It's where the suicides go, are the lyrics of the rock song. Like the father of a man I once loved, who locked up his dress shop and, arm dangling from the car window, smoked his last Marlboro as he drove down Montgomery Street, never braking. The city's machinery fished out the car, bleeding water, and him, a man who no longer needed to make up his mind. So I'm now going to read a few from this book, which came out in 2022 from Broadstone Books, The Damage Done. This is, in a sense, one long poem, although it's broken up into parts, and it's inspired by the COINTELPRO program of the FBI, which was started by J. Edgar Hoover and was used to harass various progressive groups, including civil rights groups, indigenous rights groups, feminist rights groups, etc. It has a protagonist named Janie, who is a contributor to progressive causes and is found dead at the beginning of the book. And as the book unfolds, we find out what happened to her, with some asides about things that were going on in the late 60s and early 70s. So this is a woman speaking distinctly. If your flame licked, chain nicked, does it mean you like playing with fire? All kinds of things spin out of control. Pyres end in burned torsos. If you think it's enough to be the country's sweetheart, you might be surprised when you're suddenly not. In that turnaround, you could make book on being watched and make your plan, the only way to avoid the stake on which you die, the way to rise above the blaze. Much of her story is told in flashbacks, and this is titled Flashback Bedroom. It's sort of the backstory of her marriage. Blame the walls and doors. They entice the husband to punch them. 5 stitches on his right wrist just last summer. Inanimate objects only. He says he is a man of peace. His familiar rage, it doesn't cease with 3 days in a row of humid heat, 90 degrees. And how come Janie wasn't in her room in Taos after the shoot? Like an asymptote, she's gotten so close to perfection, can taste how close, like she tastes the black coffee, water, sugarless gum, all she's had for days, so tired of being shown off like an expensive watch. Her precision surgery on her food, he critiques her microscopic cutting, and how did her ass blow up overnight? The mirror is relentless. The water, she drinks too much of it, needs to do more calisthenics. The weight on the scales unchanging. The food she pretends to eat. Sometimes she has to put a small bit in her mouth, exercise the gain away, or purge, but anything is better than throwing up again. The rules for when he can look at her, only when dressed or when the lights are out, darkness and cover. Her ribs, where downy, pale white fur has begun to grow, though she is freezing all the time. The room of ecru walls, the color picked from over 30 variations of beige. For weeks, samples were shuffled and placed on their bed while she tried to decide, his only comment, that nothing was getting laid on their bed lately except the paint swatches. blame the husband. He likes them thin and young. This next poem introduces one of the bad guys in the story, the Fed, who is working for Hoover, and you will see echoes in this poem of the assassination of Fred Hampton. He's smug about the way to work a raid, says yes to an informant planting secobarbital in something sweet like Kool-Aid, to a floor plan that shows where each man in the Panthers sleeps, to career advancement for the artistic stoolie, a warrant to sweep for illegal shotguns, which his team will plant right before the sun comes up, says yes to 3 unmarked cars, 2 teams, 1 for each entrance, a kick that splits the front door, to shots, shoulder, chest, heart, head, to putting in cuffs the few men not yet snuffed, arrested for the pile-on of unlawful possession of weapons, aggravated assault, attempted murder, like Huey Newton seized for a voluntary manslaughter that occurred while he was unconscious, bullet in his abdomen. Yes, to a delay a few days of the autopsies so that blood samples hint at normal recreational drug use instead of FBI's slyness, to a little pressure on the ballistics examiner, blackmail over that tryst of his with a man the Fed tells him play or get out of the game. I'd now like to read one from this wonderful anthology that One Breath Rising put out of poems by participants in the reading series. This is, and I put links to all these books and also to the anthology in the chat if you're interested. And this poem is an epistolary poem. It's addressed to Elvis Presley, and it's called Dear Elvis. Your pelvis should be under glass, gyrating in the Smithsonian. I thought those hips moved for me. Loved you tender, thought we'd marry. I wasn't hillbilly, but could be rockabilly, hungry for rebellion. I forgave you incoherence, amphetamines, the schlock of your movies. You married Priscilla instead of waiting. Can't help falling in love was supposed to be our song. I forgave you your meeting with Nixon, the negative shit you said about hippies, your drug abuse and hypocrisy. I forgave you for getting fat, recurrent comas, bad recordings, paranoia. I could never forgive you for dying. Way down, you sang, and that's where you went, frozen in a seated position on your bathroom floor. And yet there were so many sightings of you, as if you never left. It's true that as a child, I really thought that was my career move was going to be to marry Elvis. Didn't happen. So I'm going to turn now to some recent work, some of which will find its way into If This Isn't Love, the new manuscript. As many of you know, or some of you know, I was in Indochina for the month of February, and it inspired several poems, and this is one of them, and it's titled After a Photograph by Hung Do of a Street Scene in Hanoi. Which is better, we debate, car or scooter? It's a poor country. People who want cars buy scooters. More versatile, he explains, can transport couch, door, even water buffalo. Here is the photo he shows me on his phone. Behind the couple, draped over the back of a scooter, a water buffalo. Only the man sits fully on the seat, the animal's legs bound together with heavy brown rope. Brown cloth wraps the animal's head so it cannot see, though surely it hears the noise of the road. It's upside down, looks dead. No, live, Hung Do says, they like to kick. How else but a scooter to get one to the home that makes a man, Now an apartment houses so expensive. Used to be a man needed 3 things in this order: water buffalo, wife, house. Now a job has replaced the water buffalo, and the wife too goes to work. Her wages will transport them like a second water buffalo, more slowly than a car or scooter that will carry heavy loads as a scooter does. They will eat it, meat and butter fat, deep-grained hide for shoes, the second animal sign in the Vietnamese zodiac after the mouse. I travel a lot and it always inspires poems. And this is another one from another trip titled Barcelona. And so I return to New York City, shoes nicked from paving stones, a slight tan. I can still taste the purplish sweetness of sangria, though I cried at a cafe one afternoon, the police rounding up the Manteros, Senegalese and Southeast Asian immigrants selling handbags, roughing them in their blankets of counterfeits into unmarked vans. Did I tell you I saw a shirt I knew you'd like in the window of a closed shop? This too reminds me of thwarted wishes. When I circled back, I couldn't find that store. All around me were Americans, nervous because of the terrorist driver on La Rambla. I stopped to look closely at the colorful birds in the market, remembering how the last time I walked these streets, everything was just low-level murmur in my world. This year, even with the pretty birds, I couldn't ignore that people were dying on streets in so many places. Last night, I dreamed you wrote a memoir, and I was anxious to know what you said about me. Did I tell you the shirt I couldn't buy had little squiggles that were the same color as your eyes? I noticed in one of the notices about the reading that went out, there was an excerpt from this poem from an older book, so I thought I'd read the whole thing, and it's called Incantation. The best thing to die from is living. Let me kill myself slowly with pleasure. Let me dance round and round in circles first. Let me blow a lot of fuses. Let me age like a good slab of steak, tender, but with the mold trimmed. Let me be a car going 80 miles per hour. Let me reach 80. The exquisite torture of those many years is compelling. Let them not be Chaplin-esque. Let them say she never knew what hit her. Let it be like the one James Dean got, only much later. Let me not surrender to humiliations. I'm sorry, I have to turn off my mail. Let me not surrender to humiliations. Let me end when my mind, still sharp, is somewhere else, dreaming of perfectly grilled spaghetti, the rosemary perfume so strong it could be sealed in my pillow, of hot sex, and let that be not so long gone that it burns like a bad joke. In the valley of the shadow of death, I'd still like my red lipstick, please. Let my breasts not reach my waist. Let there be very little scar tissue on me at the time, and let there be a weeping willow under it, a significantly younger man, my own little honey cake, who is weeping too, though I don't wish that on him for long. He'll have a life to live. I wrote that some years before I was discovering that my breasts were starting to approach my waist. Well, okay, so this is the first poem in If This Isn't Love, and it's titled Love Stories for Girls. This is this new manuscript is very much inspired by the Italian telenovela, in particular, one called Un Posto al Sole, which has been the longest running telenovela in Italy, very popular, has been running for over 20 years. And of course, growing up, my views of love were influenced very much by two things other than Elvis, and that was the telenovela and true romance magazines, which basically pretty much taught the same sort of distorted and melodramatic views of love. So this is Love Stories for Girls. Every distortion I learned about love came from romance comics and later telenovelas. I blame the words love at first sight, walking in the rain, walking on beaches, dancing on beaches, red convertibles. I blame messages about the unimportance of a career, unrealistically perfect bodies, and men with full heads of hair. I blame super long eyelashes and the negative portrayal of eyeglasses, the idea of nice girls. I blame kissing, really, as if kissing fries the brain, and afterward everyone ends up in love with an inappropriate person and they're never the same again. I blame makeup that tears never smear. I blame tears. This is a history of commitment from the same manuscript. A history of commitment, by which I mean unpredictable. I was squirrely in my 20s, wore peacock feather earrings, Mother Earth skirts, tried to save money for harder times, though usually I was broke. People around me snorted coke. Love veered off before impact, a twitch away from being a traffic accident. What happened in my 30s, I hammered together lopsided bookshelves, stuck them in my mostly unused kitchen, declared my cockroach farm home, beat with a broom the man who tried to crawl through the window until he gave up. Then I installed metal bars. The front door was metal too. This was New York. I unlocked it for you when the man who slept in the hallway started shooting the ceiling lights. So there are a number of poems in the manuscript that are direct riffs on Un Posto al Sole, and this is one of them. They're all numbered, and this is telenovela 1. I don't spit on the plate where I eat, the son without steady work explains to his worried father in a long-running soap opera, an Italian proverb that sends me to the internet. They drink wine on their patio off the Golfo di Napoli. Yesterday, I was on another patio, a restaurant off Arthur Avenue. A woman with a Bronx accent was so loud, we decided to move inside, where Andrea Bocelli was singing Con te partirò on the mixtape. In Puglia, I heard the song during a church service, loved it so much I emailed the priest to ask the song's name, carefully checking that my Italian was correct. He never responded. Silly American to email a priest about a pop song of loss and goodbyes. Leaving our patio seat started a movement. The tables emptied out. Everyone then enjoyed their wine in the air conditioning, listening to Andrea Bocelli, except for the loudmouth still on the patio and her friends. When Andrea Bocelli sang in front of the Duomo in Milano during the lockdown, that video with all the silenced cities of the world, music for hope, made everyone cry as if soap were burning their eyes. We watched the death count going up. Watch the Italian family at the center of the telenovela who live in Posillipo overlooking Vesuvius. The purses are big and voluptuous. Everyone is serious. The only one smiling is the girlfriend of the married doctor who wants to rid himself of a stalker wife. The girlfriend likes his new apartment. Her walk is springy. Uh-oh, she's in love. She hasn't a clue. And I will end with a poem of revenge, which vendettas always interest me. And I had read about this one in the paper, and it's called Spite House. People say it was how the man got even, forced by a divorce contract to build a replica of their house for his soon-to-be ex-wife. He built it in the middle of an isolated marsh, salt water in the plumbing. The real spite was his abandoning her. Time, money spent on the other woman in the city. Feckless husband. I was spiteful too, and took revenge on my soon-to-be ex, though I won't say how I did. People say spite poisons the doer more than the done upon. Don't believe it. Such a burst of joy I felt as I nailed on the clapboard plank by pink plank to create something so beautiful, snowy owls still use it to roost. Thank you again.
Thank you, Susana. That was really wonderful, really wonderful.
I just expanded my Zoom thing so I could see everybody.
So I'm going to start us off with a Q&A here. I'll start off, and if anyone has any questions, please, let us know so you can ask your question. You were reading from Dead Shark on the N train. One, I find that interesting that they actually found a dead shark on the N train. But then again, this is New York, so anything.
You find lots of things. I had read another article about two goats found on the tracks, the subway tracks in Brooklyn, but I never managed to. I did try to write about that, but it didn't. I never managed to get it to work. But yeah, lots of animals in the New York City subway. Not to mention Pizza Rat, who I'm sure somebody has written about.
Right. The theme of that book, the violence, it was interesting to me how it just covered so many different types of violence. Like you went from violence against on the transportation system to violence against animals to violence against the environment that people are trying to take back and whatever. And I just wanted to know what was it about the theme that attracted you to write a book about all of those different themes?
I'm by training, I'm a sociologist. So I'm interested in various forms of rule breaking, and this is one form. And I'm also interested in gender and taught gender for a course in gender for many years. So the two interests converged for me in that way.
That's interesting. Most poets I know, you're a writer, but then you have your day job.
that was my day job.
That was the day job, yeah. So it really, I worked in corporate America, so I didn't really write poems about corporate America. I'm sure there's a lot of poetry to be written about corporate America. I just wasn't writing it. So it's interesting how your work informs your writing. Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of social themes end up in my poems. The other book, The Damage Done, about the late 60s, early 70s, and government repression during that period. That started out as a sociological interest, and I thought for many years about how to write about that from that point of view, but it didn't happen. And 20 years later, I decided, well, I think I have a way into the subject, and that was this book, The Damage Done, was my way into the subject.
I think Margo put a question in the chat.
Well, I don't use form a lot, actually, although I sometimes break that rule and I do use form. So I don't know, I think I'm anti-form generally, but not entirely. And I like certain kinds of repetitions. So some of those repetitions end up being forms. For example, there's a poem in the new manuscript in which every line of the poem ends with Bellagio, a town in Italy, and that is a form, but I don't set out to consciously write to form.
But then I have a question for you, because I was going to ask you a question about form. In your newest manuscript, where you have the love stories for girls, and those poems being based on the telenovela, what did you write them as free verse, or are they written as prose poems?
No, they're written as free verse, and I do write some prose poems. There's one prose poem in Dead Shark. There's one in The Damage Done. Actually, there's more than one in Dead Shark, because the middle section of Dead Shark is about a woman named Frances Glessner Lee, who created these dioramas of crime scenes, and there are excerpts in there. There are paragraphs in there about her life. So they are essentially prose poems, or prose, or however you want to view it. I never know exactly what the difference is between a prose poem and prose. So I've been calling them prose poems, but they're basically paragraphs.
Does anyone else have any questions? You can unmute yourself.
So Susana, can you talk a bit about word choice? Because I think you have very powerful, very pointed words in your poem. And I want to know if it just comes naturally, or whether you ponder it. How do you work with the words that you choose?
I think a lot of it comes naturally, but I do think about my words. I think we all think about our words. So I don't, how could we not think about our words? So, it's not that I don't think I've ever spent like 24 hours thinking about one particular word, although sometimes I will spend 24 hours thinking about one particular line. I ponder it, I guess, is the short answer. Yeah. What words did you find particularly powerful, for example?
Well, now you put me on the spot, and I'd have to go dig up your books here that I have many of and have written about. But I just find that well, first of all, it's partly your presentation in and of itself, because you have such a confident flow, in terms of how you read the poems themselves. But, the word choice does matter a lot. And, you aren't giving us what I would call the words that you may have picked up from being a sociologist. You have bridged that gap. You may be using concepts from that discipline, but your ability to say the right word at the right time just comes across very clearly.
I do try very hard not to sound like a sociologist in the poems. Sometimes a concept or phrase sneaks in there, but it's usually out of there by the end of the first draft. Yeah, but some of them do sort of creep in. And I also think about order and sequence. And it's interesting because I read something within the last few days where someone suggested, instead of thinking about the sequence of your manuscript, just throw it down the stairs and see what order appears. And never in a million years could I do that. You know, it just seems, and maybe with some books, it works just as well as putting them all out on the floor as I do, and as many of us do, and then trying to find a way to get everything related to everything. But it seems, it seems impossible to do that.
I don't believe in that method myself. You know, you don't throw things down the stairs and expect them to be interesting. They are chaos.
Yeah.
And you know, as a writer, we owe it to our readers to navigate the chaos.
There's no stair. I live in an apartment anyway, so even if I wanted to do that, I wouldn't be able to do it. But I can't picture myself doing it.
Actually, I was thinking I might try that, because while it might be, even chaos has an order.
Well, that's true.
Even chaos has an order. So you might be interested in what you actually, if you go down and start picking up the pages as they fell on top of each other, to see what that particular order was, and that might give you a starting off point to do a reorder, to put it out of chaos, as you might want to take chaos out of it.
Well, yeah, maybe, you know, if one is stuck and really not sure, why not? I mean, even
give it a shot. What the heck? Nothing beats a try but a failure, people. My mother used to say all the time. Go ahead, Cheryl.
I'm not sure that your editor might like that. I know my editor does not. She expects me to really pay attention to the links. But I've been fascinated by your reading, and I was wondering, what is your process like? Do you have particular times that you write? Is it every day? Is it early in the morning? What are something that goes into your work, the planning or not?
I'm a morning. I'm more alert in the morning, so I tend to work in the morning. Yeah, and if I can't come up with something to write, then I revise.
Oh, okay.
Much as I hate that part of it, of course, that's part of it. So yeah, so if I'm stuck, I just go back to older ones and start rewriting them. And if I really, after a while, just can't do anything with it, I have it's probably a bad habit, but I will destroy poems and then delete all the files so I can't retrieve them. So I know that makes people cringe, but yeah, once a year I go through everything and I call out what I say. I can't do anything with this, and I don't want to try anymore, and I will destroy them. But make sure I can't retrace. Yeah.
Shocking.
And do you have a practice of meditation or music, or
no?
get you started?
I'm a failed meditator. I can't direct my attention that way. So I have to go in with all my neurotic energy and do what I can.
Well, you do a great job.
Thank you.
Yeah, you do. Have you been writing longer than you worked?
Yes. Well, I started writing poems in my late teens, early 20s, but then I became an academic and I stopped for a while because of publish or perish type constraints. And so I focused on a different kind of writing. When I look at that writing now, I mean, I have to admit it's really turgid. And at a certain point, I just thought I couldn't do it anymore, and then returned to literary writing. So in a sense, I've been doing it since then, but there was a big gap where I didn't do it. My when I was a child, I wrote short stories, and my father, who was an English teacher, bought my first short story for $100, which was a lot of money for a kid. And I really appreciate, despite, all the years of therapy in which I complained about both my parents and, a whole bunch of other things, I really appreciate that now, because I think the message was, this is a worthwhile thing to do.
Mhm.
You want to do it.
Yeah, he did. That was very generous of him to do that, because a lot of parents don't do that.
Yeah, I know. They want something more practical, and
Right.
it isn't practical. But so
I have a question that I'd like to ask, which is, I think another remarkable thing about Susana's work is that from her first collection, The Scottish Cafe, she's chosen a subject matter, or you have chosen a subject matter that you've been able to write extremely interesting collections of poetry about. And I was wondering if you usually end up doing that by starting with a few poems and then building on it, or how you go about succeeding in writing these amazingly different collections of poetry.
Margo was my first editor, which is how we met 20 years ago, when the Slavering Press chapbook competition, which is a competition for people who have not yet published a collection, and it's every year. And I think everybody here is fairly well published. There's a couple of people I don't know, so that information might be useful for you. I don't know. And if so, you can look on the Hudson Valley Writers Center website for a page which describes the competition and what you need to do to enter it. But yeah, that particular collection was about a group of Polish mathematicians right in a city in what was then Poland, right before World War II, and the notion of trying to create a kind of intellectual life, a quality life, when all this other crap is going on around you. But I do tend to very often write to theme, and yeah, sometimes the themes don't go anywhere. It's not that they don't go anywhere, but they don't go into a larger body of work. There might be 2 or 3 poems on that particular theme, but other times the poems just keep coming out. Sometimes in a chapbook length theme, like in The Scottish Cafe, but also often in a larger body of work. I like writing to theme. It's interesting because I don't like writing to prompts, but the theme is a kind of prompt. It keeps you on a certain trajectory.
I have a question. It's great reading, and thank you so much, Susana. And thanks for the manuscript advice. I have a staircase right here outside this room, and I'll give that a spin tonight. One thing I really admire in your work is your unflinching look at violence, whether it be gender or what have you. But one of the things I wonder about that, because I have some of that in my own work, and that is, are you ever concerned, because sometimes I am, that you might be adding to the total sum of violence by becoming so close to it and describing it so viscerally?
No, I don't actually. I don't think my work is that explicit in I don't think of it as sort of spectator porn, so to speak. If I'm writing about it, it's not in a prurient way. So no, I don't feel that I am.
Yeah, but it's always I always, whenever I do this, and I've done it, I have quite a few published poems in this, though. Whenever I do that, I always have that, you've got to get, it's almost like it's a fine line. You have to go, I think, into it unflinching, but at the same time, remember that at the end of the day, you have to, you're taking a stance against violence. And so I think you do that wonderfully in your work, but I was just wondering if you're ever concerned about that. I have that philosophical concern.
Yeah, no. I think it depends on how you write about something.
Yeah, I noticed in the ones that you were reading from Dead Shark that you were writing about someone's act of victimization, but you weren't making the people who were people or the animal or whatever it was necessarily a victim.
I'm sorry, necessarily
a victim. You don't write about, you didn't make the people who were the subject of that behavior victims.
Well, I try to give some agency. The shark didn't have any agency. The young girl in the first poem, who is actually me. That's and not everything I write is from biography, but that one is. I maybe because it was me, I did give her agency at the end. She runs and she gets away. So my preference is to give the.
When you read that, all I thought was, oh, New York smart. Back in the day when we were kids, we used to ride the subway by ourselves. You had to learn how to maneuver.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I'm a New York City kid, so I've been on the subway alone without parents because then you could do that since I was 12 years old. So I can get anywhere on the subway.
Right. So, are there any more questions?
Even jumped over the turnstiles.
No, I didn't do that. My legs are too short. I think I would have problems doing that.
I didn't either. I was a little awkward. So jumping over the turnstiles wasn't gonna do it. But it's interesting because in the work, your work does encompass that craziness that is New York.
It is urban.
Yeah.
I don't write about nature all that much, so, here and there, but mostly, yeah, the poems are fairly urban.
Well, and in the Dead Shark poem, I guess you were kind of writing about it was nature. It just was urban nature.
Well,
like I used to write.
There are animals, and I mean,
Right.
The water buffalo on the back of the scooter is. I mean, I'm writing about nature in a way, but it's an animal in the middle of a big city, and it's an animal that's in a kind of in traffic, basically.
Yeah. And and in the city, nature shows up in so many odd places. Like there was I think it was like a lilac bush or something growing out of the train track where the Metro North goes over like 110th Street. On the train track, there was a bush. Oh, yeah. It would be like somebody planted it there, but there's no dirt really. The bush is just growing. Yeah. So it's a little interesting how nature tries to take back what we've taken away from it, regardless of where it decides to pop up. It's interesting. Are there any more questions? If not, we will thank Suzanne so much for coming and reading for us today from your new books, and we're looking forward to your next manuscript. And we wish you much success with it. And thank you everyone for coming out this afternoon and you know, listening to Suzanne and supporting One Breath Rising. And we hope that you'll join us next month. Actually, next month, we're actually going to be doing a live, one of our live performances at is it the Soapbox Factory, Joy? Joy gets the name right. I always don't say the name right.
Soapbox Gallery.
At the Soapbox Gallery, it'll be myself, Robert Gibbons, Cheryl Boyce Taylor will be joining us, I believe. And we are going to be joined by the J. Rodriguez Trio. So please come out to Brooklyn next month. I believe the date is April 19th, if I'm not mistaken.
16th.
16th.
Yeah.
The week, it's the Sunday after Easter.
Right.
Okay. So come out to Brooklyn and join us for one of our live performances. It'll be poetry and jazz, and you're guaranteed to have a wonderful time. So again, thank you everyone for coming out, and I'm going to turn it back over to Joy.
Yes, and
Close us out.
I also want to thank everyone who came out today.
I don't really have much to add. Thank you so much, Susanna. That was really amazing. And the scope of everything that you write about is just amazing. Really makes us think. And thank you everybody for coming out. And we'll see you soon. We'll see you either next month in Brooklyn or the month after. We'll be back on Zoom.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.